This is episode 9 of Art, Why I Stuck with a Junkie Jazz Man. In episode 8, I talked about my relationship with my 6-year-old daughter and how a Synanon volunteer lawyer went to court to get me visitation rights with her. In episode 9, Synanon gives me a new job, and after 2.5 years, Art splits. Synanon, as was its wont, had given me a job change. The school had moved again to the club on the beach, and there'd be no more workshops. So I was sent to the visual communications department, the print shop, where I worked for Lou Delgado. We had 3 or 4 offset presses, a giant darkroom, and everything necessary to publish flyers and intra- and interfacility documents. Synanon had large facilities in San Francisco, Tomales Bay, and Oakland at that time. I was immediately put to work making paste-ups and shooting them, stripping flats, and burning the metal plates, which were used on the offset presses. My boss, Louie, was the best teacher I have ever had. He was a tall, big-boned, young Puerto Rican junkie from New Jersey. He was unflappable, with a giant loopy grin. Kind and patient, he taught me how to learn. Don't be a smartass. If you act like you know less than you do, people will tell you things. And how to work. Before you start, make sure you have everything you need to hand. Yes, I had to be taught to do that. He kept a huge flow chart on the wall for every job we did. About 6 months before I left, Louis was disciplined by Synanon for no good reason, and he was pulled from the print shop and given a menial job. I was put in charge. I couldn't have run that shop without talking to him on the telephone a couple of times a week. He was the only one who could coax the ancient presses to perform. He'd sneak in at night and fix them. Then Synanon stopped smoking. The next section is called The End of Synanon. In 1971, the smoking ban came down, and with it, punishments for inevitable violations and the subsequent departures of a lot of people. It was a way of, quotes, clearing the place of dead wood, the useless old-timers, the walking dead who contributed next to nothing to the community. This was a regular Synanon occurrence, a major rule change that challenged the status quo. But this time the disruption was enormous. Secret violations of the ban continued, even on the highest levels, and eventually all the male tribe leaders were bussed up to the Northern California ranch facility at Tomales Bay and instructed, guilty and innocent alike, to shave their heads. It came about like this. One of the old-timers had been diagnosed with emphysema and instructed by his doctor to stop smoking. He was one of Chuck's closest friends. Chuck Diederich, Synanon's founder, was an alcoholic who'd gotten sober in AA. He was the visionary who'd figured out how to cure the heretofore incurable, heroin addicts. He was the genius who designed this truly miraculous organization and saved a lot of people, including me. Neither Art nor I could like him. He was arrogant, scary, and pugnacious. He was ugly, had an ugly voice, and a style of irritatingly redundant speech, which we were commanded to listen to on endless and profoundly boring tapes. But he was our monarch, and Chuck had decided he'd better stop smoking too, and so should we all. I don't think he was trying to legislate health, and don't think he understood at that time the dangers of secondhand smoke. I think he didn't want to do it alone. I believe that this rule was Synanon's death knell. Its successful implementation began Chuck's descent into an insanity of despotism, which I think was always in his character. This is just a theory, but I like it. The smoking ban turned law abiders into criminals. For a lot of people, it's harder to stop smoking than it is to stop shooting dope. All of Synanon's activities up till then had gone on under a cloud of cigarette smoke amidst a comforting clatter of ashtrays. Then suddenly that mighty, crazy organization quit tobacco. And within the next few years, as a result, I'm convinced, of Chuck's realization of his absolute power and his accompanying spiraling imperiousness, the place went mad. Chuck, 1, dissolved and arranged hundreds of marriages by decree. 2, established and trained a force of, quotes, Marine commandos who stockpiled arms and beat up nosy strangers. 3, suggested to some resident thugs that they deal with an annoying lawyer, so they put a rattlesnake in his mailbox and let young Lance Kenton, Stan Kenton's handsome, science-minded son, take the fall. 4, decided everybody should start drinking. 5, decided everybody should start smoking again. In 1971, Art couldn't stop smoking and was sliding off on solitary walks to puff. I suspected him. In Straight Life, he says, quotes, one time I was kissing Laurie and she started sniffing. She stuck her nose into my mouth. She said, "You've been smoking. You've been smoking." She had her whole nose and half her head in my mouth. "You've been smoking." His life was hell. An old friend of his had split, left Synanon, and was calling him at work to tell him how fine it was to be free. We never spoke of it together because he knew I'd have to speak of it in games, but I knew he was going. When it began in 1958, Synanon was organized by Chuck Diedrich to cure addicts in 2.5 years, returning them to society as graduates. But very quickly it became apparent that a staff of trained, committed, unpaid workers could sustain and improve a business capable of creating and selling products, custom engraved office supplies sold by Synanon Industries, where Art worked, and purchasing and improving ranch land and city property in Northern California. So the initial 2-year education in sobriety became schooling for a lifelong career for, quotes, Synanon professionals, the residents who ran the place, along with all the drones like me and Art, who therapized the newcomers, raised the kids, cooked, cleaned, hustled goods from donors, and sold those office supplies. When I entered in 1968, I asked how long it would take to cure me and was told the 2-year story. It had, by then, become a lie. It was accepted when I was there that any addict of any Synanon seniority who left was committing suicide, that he'd return inevitably to drugs. People who did leave were called splittees and scorned. If they screwed up out in the world and came back to get help, and that happened often, the opprobrium and ridicule they had to endure indefinitely from the community and games was pretty humiliating. So the decision to split was a monumental one. If you mentioned that you thought about it, you'd be gamed, continuously, mercifully, mercilessly, talked at endlessly. Christmas was coming, and Art hinted to me that he was planning to leave, but a resident square couple, friends of ours, went back east for the holidays and offered us the use of their apartment for the week. Their record player, their kitchen to cook and eat in, their bedroom to wake up together in. Art, I knew, would not resist this sentimental farewell. We had a heartbreaking week together, talking about ourselves and the world, but never saying anything about the imminent, seemingly permanent separation that was coming. I'd been trained by Synanon to imagine Art would crash and burn, and that seemed likely, especially to him. They called people like Art hope-to-die dope fiends. He was like a soldier who was required to return to the front. During that time, I played a Joni Mitchell album all day long. I sang along with her about escape from pain. River. It's coming on Christmas. They're cutting down trees. They're putting up reindeer and singing songs of joy and peace. Oh, I wish I had a river I could skate away on. Our idyll ended before New Year's. On the morning after we returned to our separate living quarters and our jobs, I looked out the big storefront window of the print shop and saw dark clouds parting, the remains of a rainy night. If it clears, I thought. I knew Art, who hated any discomfort, wouldn't travel in rain and wind. I worked a while and then looked up as bright sunlight streamed suddenly into the room. The weather had turned gorgeous, fresh. He's gone, I told myself.